Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Basis Points, where we dive deep into the numbers and the stories that drive our economy and shape our world. The headlines. The Senate approves the proposed 6.35 trillion peso national budget for 2025. Officials hail the move by S&P Global Ratings to raise the credit rating outlook for the country from stable to positive. Bitcoin retreats further, falling back to $91,000. Is the crypto market's Trump rally losing steam? We'll discuss this and more with cryptocurrency expert Arlon Abello later on in the show. And Huawei unveils its Mate 70 smartphone series, the first to be powered by its fully homegrown operating system. First, a recap of the financial markets. Wall Street's main indices rise as tech stocks rebound. This comes after the Fed's latest minutes showed officials appear divided over how much further they may need to cut interest rates. Investors are also digesting new tariff pledges by President-elect Donald Trump on China, Canada, and Mexico.
Risk with tariffs that could impact inflation and prices in a negative way. Absolutely, that can absolutely happen. But it is, again, not black and white. Tariffs have impacts that can also be positive. So will they neutralize each other? So remember, the purpose of tariffs is an attempt to encourage foreign companies to bring operations to the United States, to create jobs in the United States, to raise wages in the United States, right? And then more goods are being produced here, and then American consumers are consuming U.S.-made goods. And so that's the point of tariffs. So in some way, if they're successful and they're very targeted, they can actually have the opposite effect. But we really won't know until we have better clarity on what kind of tariffs would be put in place.
Over in Europe, stocks closed lower as traders assess the implications of Trump's trade policies. France's CAC 40 declined the most, falling nearly 1%. Here in the Asia-Pacific, markets open mixed this Wednesday. Traders in Asia will be assessing monthly CPI figures out of Australia, which are set to be released later in the day. And in the commodities market, Brent crude prices rose 0.1%, trading at $73 a barrel. Gold, meanwhile, is down 0.5%, trading at $2,600 per troy ounce. Now, the Senate approves the 6.35 trillion peso national budget for 2025. The budget bill was passed on both second and third reading within a single day after President Bongbong Marcos certified it as urgent. 18 senators voted in favor with no negative votes. However, Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel abstained, saying he's taking a wait-and-see approach as amendments may still be introduced during the bicameral meetings. The national budget is vital for funding development programs, addressing economic challenges, and supporting infrastructure and social services. Now, on another front, S&P Global Ratings upgrades the Philippines' credit rating outlook from stable to positive. The sovereign credit rating remains at BBB+. S&P credits effective policymaking and fiscal reforms for the outlook upgrade. It also notes that the recent passage of the Create More law enhances the Philippines' appeal to investors. S&P expects the economy to grow by 5.5% this year, slightly below the government's target of between 6 to 7% for the period. It also forecasts inflation to ease to 3.3% by year-end, down from the current 6%. This upgrade reflects growing confidence in the Philippines' economic recovery and its ability to attract more investments. The country's officials welcome the credit rating upgrade from S&P. The finance secretary views this as a strong vote of confidence in the leadership of President Bongbong Marcos and in his economic policies. For Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Eli Romolono Jr., the upgrade highlights the government's success in strengthening the economic, fiscal, and monetary environment. He also reaffirmed the country's capacity to protect the peso with adequate foreign exchange reserves. Now, listed companies are maintaining a bullish outlook despite the recent volatility of the stock market. Sujin Kim has the details.
After closing in the negative territory on Friday, local shares quickly recovered at the start of the new week. Despite the recent ups and downs at the stock market, some companies are still trading higher and have seen an increase in their stock prices. Manila Water President Jose de Dios continues to maintain a more bullish outlook for the PSEI.
I'm very optimistic. They're very good players and performers. We're obviously we're in that. I think we're in that cohort, but I do see a lot of very interesting stock picks as well and plays, and just goes to our firm belief that the infrastructure sector is in a very good trajectory over the next few years.
Manila Water's current stock price is closer to the higher end of its annual range. The stock climbed 50.78% over the past year.
Year to date, we're up. A 12-month period, we're up about 50%. I think the stock is obviously undervalued. So I would suppose that if we continue our performance, again, without paying too much attention to the stock price is a function of how you perform and how investors perceive.
Ayala, while trading near the higher end of its annual range, experienced a slight decline of 1.53% over the past year, attributed in part to the developments in the U.S. elections. PLDT, on the other hand, has acknowledged challenges stemming from third-quarter results that did not meet expectations, as well as ongoing issues with liquidity.
A lot of the large names are not doing very well in terms of the market. So you saw the PSE dip from 7,000 level. So that's really market sentiment. PLDT by itself, I think, is really affected by the market.
Despite these challenges, Vergel de Dios remains positive.
I think in the short term, the fourth quarter will include the holiday lift. And then going forward, there are new businesses and new initiatives that we are working on to be able to deliver good results for 2025.
Listed companies continue to monitor movements by the central bank, especially after BSP Governor Eli Remolona Jr. signaled a possible 25 basis point rate cut in the next month and 100 in 2025. Sujin Kim, BNC.
Business Group, the Management Association of the Philippines, elects new officers for 2025. Former Finance Department official Noel Bonoan will succeed this year's MAP president, Jose Rene Gregory Almendras. Bonoan currently serves as Vice Chair, COO, and Head of Advisory at KPMG Manabat and Company. Alongside Bonoan, attorney Mike Toledo has been named Vice President. He currently serves as Director for Government and Public Affairs at Metro Pacific Investments Corporation. Meanwhile, Wilson Tan has been appointed as MAP Treasurer. Tan is the chairman and country managing partner at SGV and Company. The new officers bring extensive experience and leadership, ensuring the continued success and influence of MAP in shaping business policies in the country. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back to Basis Points. Trading at the Philippine Stock Exchange opened just a few minutes ago. Let's take a look at the initial figures. Right now, at 9:40 this morning, the PSE index is trading sideways in the green, slightly up by 0.2% to 68.19. Now, the PSE index extended its losses yesterday, down by 0.6% to 68.07. The main gauge had been in the red for the past 3 consecutive sessions, losing about 0.8% over this period. Now, analysts say the market's lackluster performance comes on the back of a weaker peso and lingering political noise from the country's 2 highest offices in the land, keeping investors sidelined. Now, the peso's depreciation in particular is weighing on foreign investor sentiment because it erodes the value of stock returns. Note that foreign investors are crucial for the Philippine market. We need this to enhance liquidity and drive stock prices higher, which is difficult with local participation alone. Now, speaking of the peso, at the foreign exchange market, the peso opened stronger against the dollar at 58.92 compared to its previous close of 59 flat. Now, after nearing what would be a historic milestone of $100,000, Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency, continues to retreat. Now, is the rally prompted by Donald Trump's election victory losing steam? Let's get insights into this from the founder and CEO of Global Miranda Minor Group, Arlon Abello, who joins us now on the show via Zoom. He is the founding chairman also of the innovative movement of the Philippine Association of Crypto Traders, or Impact. Hi, Arlon. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Maiki, for having me here. Thank you, Bilyonaryo.
Okay, so Arlo, talk to us about Bitcoin's rally. Is it losing steam?
You know what? I don't think so. In fact, the intraday retracements we're seeing from 100,000, almost near that neighborhood, down to 91,000. We saw profit taking from institutions and retailers who entered within the $74,000 previous all-time high breakout, and we also saw a correlation of Bitcoin from a price perspective after Trump himself made his trade policies and pronouncements, particularly when we saw that he pronounced tariffs to be given to Canada, to Mexico, and China. We saw a correlated move on Bitcoin retracing. So in both occasions, we saw that obviously pronouncements of the president-elect and also profit-taking. And another thing is the technical support breakdown from a technical analysis are the ones who's actually driving a little bit of retracements at this point. However, we believe that we're just obviously in the middle of the bull run, and this is not yet the end, Mikey, on a big picture.
Arlen, what do you think it would take for Bitcoin to break past the $100,000 mark per token? Following this Trump fever, what do we need? Perhaps I'm thinking regulatory clarity to know, once there's more information, the possibilities expand a little bit more. What's your take on the situation?
It's a very good question because we're coming from a year, 2022, 2023, we're governed by the macroeconomics, with high inflation, obviously equities, and Bitcoin saw a correlated dive, from a price perspective. So 2024, Bitcoin is coming to an era of regulatory clarity. I say it because way back July of this year, when Trump gave his campaign speech, and he gave a lot of promises, 6 of which, number one, he's going to use Bitcoin as a national reserve in the US to the tune of almost $4 billion. And it's obviously creating that hype from institutions and from an adoption perspective. Therefore, we see that if he's going to fulfill his promises, number one, Bitcoin as a national reserve. Number two, he's going to fire one of the famous proponents of Bitcoin from a regulatory perspective, in this case, SEC Chair Gary Gensler. He said he's going to fire him. So if he's going to fulfill those 6 promises within the next 100 days, then we can potentially see the market growing their appetite further. Adoption is going to be, even bigger, and we could see ourselves 100K above anytime next year.
Yeah, with the U.S. taking a leadership role in this space, it's interesting to see how the rest of the world is going to follow, particularly with the U.S., the big possibility of the U.S. using Bitcoin in their own reserves. How do you think the role of Bitcoin will evolve in global financial systems?
We have seen countries already use Bitcoin as a legal tender. Near shore, we have El Salvador, obviously in other countries. We have seen, at least within the Hong Kong, we have authorized several registered trading platforms to be able to allow buying and selling of Bitcoin. I would say one of the biggest tick for us, or a check mark that needs to happen, is when China starts to unban Bitcoin. If you recall, 2021, China officially banned Bitcoin. It was the reason why Bitcoin went a nosedive from $64,000 down to $25,000, because they said, we're going to be banning Bitcoin altogether. But if they start to open, and so the dynamics here is obviously there's a political play between whether China is going to unban Bitcoin just because Trump policy is going to use Bitcoin as a national reserve. If they obviously try to open the market again for Bitcoin, then we're going to be seeing a lot of folks within the East Asia and the Asian region to start buying Bitcoin. And that's going to be one of the biggest drivers why Bitcoin can potentially further grow up.
Interesting. Bitcoin as a key asset in investment portfolios. In the United States, most of the people that hold Bitcoin are from America. Can you give us an idea of the numbers about how much percent of the people that hold the token are from the U.S. vis-a-vis from elsewhere in the world?
So at an average, north of 60% of the traders are from the U.S. Let's talk about some of the statistics. So number one, from an institution perspective, when the SEC in the U.S. approved the spot Bitcoin ETF January 11 of this year, we saw that the market capitalization of Bitcoin from institutions have grown from zero to almost $110 billion as we speak, just in 11 months, Mikey. So we're seeing growth from a perspective of adoption led by BlackRock, and we continue to see, and we're seeing that financial advisors will be recommending to their clients to start including Bitcoin in their portfolio, especially for the baby boomers and the early Gen Xers. So we're going to be seeing some of those to include, obviously, because it's going to be fueled by regulatory clarity in the U.S.
Well, interest in Bitcoin is high. The pace of the appetite for Bitcoin varies across the region. Can you talk to us about the demand for Bitcoin from both institutional and retail investors? How does that compare from the U.S. To the Philippines?
There's this one thing we're all waiting from our organization. We're waiting for this very important bill that was vetoed by Biden when obviously in his administration, the Staff Accounting Bulletin 121. This was a bill that was passed both from the Senate and the Congress in the U.S. and unfortunately it was vetoed by Biden. And this bill obviously allows everyone in the U.S., all of the banks in the U.S. to have custody of Bitcoin. So when this happens, we're obviously seeing banks adopting to Bitcoin. And just imagine this, Mikey, if you see our banks, in the malls or wherever it is, you see them having custody of Bitcoin, it would obviously build more trust and confidence to the asset itself. So from a difference perspective, we're seeing, slow adoption from an institution perspective. Obviously, it was one of those stigma that they say, we don't want to put our hands there just because there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. But from a retail perspective, it's where you see individuals, whales we call them, obviously adding to their portfolio. One of that is Michael Saylor, who's obviously a very much proponent of Bitcoin, who recently pronounced they're going to be selling some convertible notes to be able to buy billions of dollars of Bitcoin again.
Of course, it's the whales that are getting on this because of the high price barrier, but because of fractional ownership, a lot more are going to be able to, a lot more can take part in this in Bitcoin's bull run, and perhaps, as the token rises, the price of the token rises further down the line. I wanted to ask you, what should investors consider before buying into Bitcoin, even if it's just fractional ownership?
That's a very good question. So we always say in our community, number one, you need to understand what's the use case of Bitcoin. You need to understand what wallets are, because not your keys, not your coins. You cannot have Bitcoins if you don't understand how to have a custody of Bitcoin itself. Number two, we say to our communities, you don't buy Bitcoin if you're not insured, you have no emergency funds, etc. So this is sort of a speculative asset. Vis-a-vis, you could compare this to equities at this point. Obviously, you don't want to buy these high volatility asset if you're not really insured, you have no emergency funds. So we want to build that first from a fundamentals perspective before we even go to Bitcoin. The way we look at it, I would say Bitcoin is starting to gain regulatory acceptance, which means that we're on our way to have banks, institutions, capital investment companies to start advocating for Bitcoin, to make it part of their portfolio. What we're hearing is that an average of 5% of their portfolio is starting to be open for Bitcoin at this point. So we don't want to obviously mirror that at this point. We have our own different risk appetites, but that's at least what we're seeing from an industry perspective, Nike.
Now, one last question before I let you go. We are just out of time. Assuming the regulatory environment in the U.S., it goes the way Bitcoin traders want it to go, cryptocurrency traders want it to go. What's your outlook for Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, under a favorable regulatory environment in the United States?
So I said this October of last year when Bitcoin was 35,000. I said it could be at around 74. I was interviewed July of this year. I said End of year, it's going to be 100. So everyone's waiting for my potential next step here. I would say we could potentially see 150, but it's going to be dependent on, to your point, Mikey, pending better and favorable conditions if Trump considers fulfilling all of his promises. And potentially, he did not say this is a promise, but who's stopping him to say, you know what, let's put Bitcoin as a national tender? It's going to be one of the things we're going to be looking forward to.
All right, again, that's $150,000 US dollars per token. That's an outlook, assuming the regulatory environment goes the way cryptocurrency traders want it to. All right, thank you, Arlon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was Arlon Abello, founder and CEO of Global Miranda Miner Group. Now, in other news, Canada, Mexico, and China are pushing back against U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs on their goods. Trump has announced that he will impose an additional 10% tariff on goods from China over its failure to stop the entry of drugs into the United States. As for Canada and Mexico, he intends to impose a 25% tariff until they clamp down on drugs and migrants crossing the U.S. border. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau pledged a, quote, serious and methodical approach to this issue.
I clearly spoke with the President of the United States an hour and a half after he put out his suggestion on tariffs. The reality is we're going to continue to work constructively with the incoming administration to protect Canadian jobs, to protect Canadian growth, to take the responsible approach that isn't steeped in partisanship, that pulls together the Team Canada approach that stands up for Canadians instead of throwing our arms up and saying all is broken like the leader of the opposition.
Mexico's president also plans to speak with Trump about his new trade policy.
Responde a estos dos temas que le está planteando.
Now, if even after that there are tariffs, what we are saying is that it is going to affect the U.S. economy and U.S. companies that have been here in Mexico for 80 years. So, it is better that we have a dialogue and come to an agreement on all these issues and others that are relevant, and we have a plan anyway.
A Chinese envoy, meanwhile, stresses that no one will win a trade war.
Of course, the U.S. policy on trade with China, with other countries as well, will have impact. And that is really an important element that we have to consider. I think the first and most for us to do perhaps is to continue the good relation and momentum between our two countries and see what we can do together to promote for global trade instead of compromising our respective national interest and our common interest.
Chinese tech giant Huawei unveils its Mate 70 smartphone series, the first to be powered by its fully homegrown operating system. The new smartphone features the Harmony OS Next, which no longer supports Android-based apps. Its rollout marks a significant step in Huawei's push for software independence, since U.S. curbs cut off its access to Google services in 2019. The phone starts at 5,000 yuan or $760 US. That's equivalent to more than 44,000 pesos. And that's it for Basis Points. I'm Maiki Oreta. We'll be back tomorrow for more news on the financial markets and more. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo news channel, always on top.